So our last question, Catherine and Sam, for this section is just, I've heard about developing safety plans. So can you tell us a little bit more about what they are and what their purpose is?
So would this be in the case of where maybe there's been somebody in the home that has done the harm, do you think? Is it we're thinking about safety plan?
Yes, potentially, yeah.
Because sometimes
They
it's
can be
not always
around.
the case that even though we at start we would have that requirement. I mean, often the person who did the harm does stay in the home, depending on the severity of the harm.
Or they
So
might have contact with
that's
family
right.
functions or gatherings and things.
Yeah, they might still have contact. So I think I think what the safety plan that we're talking about is that there would be supervised contact, that the contact would be supervised, and that, I mean, if they're still in the home, then there would be guidelines around any kind of not having any involvement in changing or bathing or anything that's that sort of type of care. I guess it depends on what the level of contact is. What would you add to that, Catherine?
I mean, it's a tough one because, as we were saying at the beginning, you know, we would be of the position that, in fact, you know, contact wouldn't be happening until both parties had got some support. And so, in our worlds, as much as possible, safety plans around this kind of contact would be with the support from the people who'd supported the person who'd done the harm, as well as the person who'd been harmed. And so there'd be some kind of restorative process where, you know, actually those parties would be put together and, you know, those conversations would be had and a plan would be put in place. And probably the biggest driver for that safety plan is not practicality. And it's probably not even the person who's done the harm, it's the person who's been harmed. Like, how do we enhance their sense of safety in the world? And that might mean that, as Sam was saying, there's a lot of supervision. It might mean that things, you know, are more, you know, difficult and kind of frustrating for everybody else because we're trying to enhance the situation, but that's actually what's necessary. And again, we're not just looking at practical physical safety, we're looking at emotional safety. And the idea of going, we might give all this thought to a safety plan and put it in place, and actually then we've got to check in that it's working. Because the assumption can be, we're all good now. But actually, how do you give space and time for the idea that safety plans can be changed and updated and worked out whether they are actually effective or not?
And I think, I'm not sure if we've talked about this, but the reasoning behind that, you know, the idea of just not having contact for a while is a really important one to, I think, for parents to get their heads around, because we do have that stipulation for a reason, and that's because we know that therapy will be more effective. It'll have the child will have a better chance of healing if they can have that time and space away from the person who harmed them. And that's because if you imagine, and I'm taking this from you, Catherine, but if you imagine trying to do earthquake counselling with someone who was traumatised in the Canterbury earthquakes, and while we're sitting here doing counselling, there's this massive great earthquake. It's not possible to do any kind of therapeutic work in that situation. So what then, if the child's still having contact with the person who harmed them, they come into therapy, we're asking them to show vulnerability, to open themselves up, to possibly even talk about some of this hard stuff, to be vulnerable. It's really difficult for them to be able to do that. And why would they, if they know that they're going to be leaving and going home and being in the presence of the person who harmed them? It's just not a fair ask for a child. And it's you know, I believe in some way unethical to expect a child to open up. It's not fair, and it's kind of challenging their very survival sort of coping, you know, their their way to kind of keep themselves safe.
So we do kind of get more vulnerable before we get stronger.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
the space you want to create.
So, and that's what we're asking them to do. So it's really unfair for us to ask them to do that, be that, when they're not even safe, not feeling safe emotionally, relationally. They're not feeling safe.
No.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.